Well, it's been another busy day in the radio and audio industry. Welcome back to Biz Audio, everyone. My name is Max, and yesterday was an even busier day. But look, it never quiets down, which is actually a good thing. Over at Nova Entertainment, Shayna Gross has announced she will be stepping into a new role of project manager for Nova 96.9's new breakfast show, Ricky, Lee and Tim. Gross was previously a project manager for audience engagement, and prior to that, she was an events coordinator at ARN. She posted on LinkedIn that she's really excited to share that she's moving into her new role, and she can't express how grateful she is. And looking over into the podcasting world, the Cheapskates podcast has relaunched. Indiana Simons' Cheapskates podcast has announced its return. The podcast started in 2024 and was relaunched last week. Prior to this, Simons held podcasting producing roles at ARN in Southern Cross, Ontario. She started the Cheapskates podcast as a 10-part passion project in 2024 with anonymous stories of cheapskates, with rotating guests each week. And looking over to ARN, Wave FM in Wollongong has a brand new general manager. Ali Longhurst has stepped into a new role as general manager of Wave FM in Wollongong. Prior to this, Longhurst was the content director and marketing leader at ARN in Brisbane. Before returning to ARN, Longhurst was at SCA as a content director and producer. Wow, what a busy day that has been. And of course, yesterday, if you did not listen to the Biz Audio podcast, there was a few things happening at Nova. And of course, the big news of the day, the Super Radio Network's Chief Executive Officer, Reese Holleran, did resign from his CEO role, which he only took up in October last year, making it one of the shorter tenures as CEO. And look, no real news on that, but Kyle Sandilands did launch his lawsuit legal action against ARN yesterday, and Christian O'Connell has came out and said that the radio ratings are ridiculous. This is a story that I think is quite interesting. And look, he has said, now this show needs your help. Now that you're probably aware of how radio works, I'm sure that you've read all about the goings on with the moments with the Kyle and Jackie O's dominations of the news headlines. Obviously, we are a breakfast show, as well as of January this year. This show is in 5 cities. We are Australia's first ever national commercial breakfast show. Look, I just want to do one thing. Now, I'm not taking this away from Christian, but Peter Samios and I do like to point out that Christian O'Connell's breakfast show theoretically is not the first national. Mikey and Emma, when they were on the Edge, they had Edge Digital in 4 markets and Edge 96.1 in Sydney. So look, just putting that out there, it could Mikey and Emma national. So hey, look, maybe they'll come back to Kiss at some point, Mikey and Emma, because of course Mikey is on Kiss. But look, one last thing, Caroline Hutchinson has been appointed the managing director of 92.7 Mix FM and 91.9 CFM. She's been appointed the brand new managing director, effective immediately following Carla Vella's decision to step back from her duties. And the stations, both of the stations have been number 1 and number 2 in the Sunshine Coast market. That's very, very interesting. Oh, here we go. More on Reese Holleran. The board director, he's a board director, and he said the foundations Vella has made will continue to shape the station long into the future. That's interesting. But look, we'll see what happens to the Super Radio Network. Of course, they've sort of re-emerged into the market, not commercially in the ratings, but look, they have new strong talent. They have Tim Webster now, and they had Ron Wilson. There we go. I was just struggling to get his name. Ron Wilson launching the station last year, and of course they have Chris Smith on mornings taking over from the late Lawsy, and they also have Talking Sport, which is local in the afternoon. There's a lot of local in Newcastle. Most of the shows are from Newcastle, weekends and some afternoons and nights. I know Cheryl and Darcy does a great show from Newcastle. But look, I think the Super Radio Network is doing all the right things to re-emerge into the market. They just need to get some really strong marketing and social media presence, and I think that will be what can get them back into the market. Of course, they have their DAB stations. I think it's Super Digi and Gorilla, some other stations like that, DAB wise in Sydney markets. But look, I think that 2SM can be a real powerhouse. I think that's why we haven't seen Mark, as Peter Samuel said, why we haven't seen Mark Levy pulling massive numbers in the Sydney market, because I think Chris Smith would be taking on some of those listeners.